Hello, peace be upon all. Assalamu alaikum. You're listening to Moel. So, last Thursday I was invited on the EA show, The Empathetic Atheist, hosted by Justin Downing. He invited me to discuss my belief, and I discussed a little bit of science and the philosophy of science, just very uh, succinct, very briefly. And also I discussed why I believed in Islam, and I went all the way back when I was like 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that. So, nonetheless, what I'm trying to get at is that the discussion went quite well on the show. He's a good host, and you should check out his show. By the way, it's very professionally conducted. So I want to basically make a review video and discuss the things that took place on the show when I was there. So one thing that I want to basically emphasize on is philosophical naturalism and methodological naturalism, because this would benefit a lot of neo-atheists if they knew what they were talking about. If they knew how to basically understand the difference between uh, these two presuppositions or and worldviews. I mean, one is a worldview and one is a presupposition. Okay, one is a presupposition in the philosophy of science, and one is a world view. Okay, so as a Muslim, okay, I can also presuppose, I must presuppose, matter of fact, I must presuppose methodological naturalism if I want to conduct the science, if I want to operate based on a scientific method, which is based on induction, empiricism, and observation. Okay, and then you do experiments and whatnot. Okay, so I have to basically put on that lens, methodological naturalism, not philosophical naturalism at all, because philosophical naturalism is the philosophical position or presupposition that the atheists assume before delving and debating the the theists or a monotheists. Okay, so we believe in a God. Okay, we believe in a God that basically is transcendental or transcends this whole dimension. Okay, and the atheists don't believe in a God. So what ends up happening, they render themselves as a lamppost. And I don't say that as an insult, because you're fundamentally physical stuff. You get what I'm saying? So you're fundamentally bosons and fermions, subparticles, quarks. You're fundamentally physical stuff at the end of the day, and basically there is no dualism. You cannot accept dualism, because you're either a dualist or a monist, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're a naturalist, then the soul does not exist. The soul is it's bosons and fermions producing introspective illusion, like Alex Rosenberg would say. The fact of the matter is nihilism. And Owen Flanagan will say it's a completely serendipitous fact. You came to be anything at all, and when you're gone forever. Okay, so that being said, nihilism becomes a fact of the matter under atheism. It's just bosons and fermions. There is no soul. There is nothing intrinsic about us. Nothing of value. Nothing of substance. Nothing. Pretty much like nothing of value. That's what I meant. So what ends up happening is that do not confuse methodological with philosophical. If you're an atheist or a neo-atheist who wants to discuss with the monotheists or a theist, and you presuppose methodological naturalism, then you're committing a fallacy of equivocation. Okay, you're committing a fallacy of equivocation, because you're bringing a presupposition, not a worldview. You're bringing a presupposition in the philosophy of science. So in a way, you're adhering to scientism, not science. And if anyone knows the philosophy of science briefly, they will know that science has no foot in the door. So there is no point, okay? It becomes superfluous, okay, to basically operate or debate the theists assuming scientism or methodological naturalism. You have to come in with the world view, not the presupposition or the underpinning, the philosophical underpinning in science. You have to come in with the worldview that is distinguished, that is separate from science itself, and that's philosophical naturalism. Now you delved into in the discipline of philosophy now, not the discipline of science. And people have to distinguish between science as a discipline, and philosophy as a discipline, and math as a discipline, and arts as a discipline, and all these disciplines that we have in society. So people have to distinguish between these disciplines. So do not conflate methodological with philosophical naturalism. Methodological is just a it's not a worldview. It's a presupposition. Because science is not a worldview. You get what I'm saying? Science itself. But if you take it or adopt it as a worldview, then it becomes scientism. Hence the ism at the end. And you don't want to do that because there's no point of debating an atheist or a theist based on that. I mean, we can delve into scientific theories and whatnot, but it won't get us far because you cannot have an epistemic justification based on science, because science is based on induction. So it cannot justify anything epistemically or epistemologically. It cannot justify anything due to the problem of induction, okay? And we know that in philosophy, the highest epistemological weight is deduction, and you can do that in philosophy. Matter of fact, you cannot do it because of the black swan fallacy, for example, which is the problem of induction. So keep that in mind, okay? I wanted to distinguish between these two things. They are presuppositions. They are, like, for example, I would say that the Darwinian theory of evolution is a philosophy masquerading as a science, because there are a lot of hidden assumptions in the Darwinian theory of evolution. I haven't studied biology, but I can tell based on assumptions. Why? Because my method of operating is based on comparison. So I like to compare between worldviews, between science, if the science is coherent, if the science is philosophically coherent, okay? And to say that we evolved from ape-type creatures, okay, you have no choice but to assume that because of methodological naturalism, which is limited. But someone else can say like philosophers who are atheists, the philosophers of science who are atheists, they will tell you, like David Stowe, it is not true in case of man. It's not true. Anthony O'Hare, okay, Anthony O'Hare will tell you the same thing. Thomas Nagel will tell you the same thing. That our rational faculties, cognitive faculties, metacognition, consciousness could have not evolved under a Darwinian paradigm, okay? Or Darwinism. If you want to take it as a worldview, becomes Darwinism, hence the ism. So you cannot account for all these things because it's beyond evolution. Like, that's the book of Anthony O'Hare. You can look it up. It's called Beyond Evolution, and he's discussing the human mind. We are not geared towards survival. We can do much more, which is seek truth and attain knowledge, okay, to distinguish between truth and falsehood, so we can have a just society, a civilized society, matter of fact. Or else, like David Stowe in his book, The Darwinian Theory, the Darwinian Fairy Tales, he says the Darwinian theory of evolution is an incitement to crime. That is simply a fact, okay? That's what he says. So we have to put that in account, because believe me, if I evolved under these survival conditions, we would be committing a lot of crimes. And this is why a lot of atheist scientists who believe in Darwinian evolution, for example, they will try to justify religion through this presupposition that we evolved and Darwinism is true. And they'll say we came up with religion so we can cooperate and become nice to each other, altruism and all this stuff. And then David Stowe will tell him, okay, but this negates, for example, we have hospitals, which shows that we care for each other and we're trying to, help each other live. Okay, so this negates what happens in nature, what happens in the wild. Nonetheless, it negates basically survival of the fittest, if I'm not mistaken. Nonetheless, in his book, David Stowe, who's an atheist, he negates, in case of man, the Darwinian theory of evolution in case of man, if I'm not mistaken. Nonetheless, we have to reflect on assumptions. Okay, they are philosophical underpinnings like homology. Homology is a philosophical underpinning. Similarities are due to common descent. Therefore, similarities exist. Therefore, similarities are true, or homology is true. But homology is a cyclical fallacy, pretty much, because you cannot justify it epistemologically. You cannot justify it philosophically because of the problem of induction. And it is a cyclical fallacy because you're operating based on methodological naturalism, another presupposition or philosophical underpinning in the philosophy of science. And you're also operating like the tree of life. We cannot observe the tree of life. It's an assumption, again, philosophical. Just like we cannot observe Adam and Eve. It's the unseen. I'm just trying to give you a comparison so you can understand what I'm talking about. It's all assumptions. Natural selection is a devastating assumption as well. Natural selection has nothing to do with similarities, has nothing to do with homology. It has to do with transmutation and transformation. How can a bacteria like a bacteria evolve into an elephant, for example, or something like that, or how did we come to be through these physical processes? But it does not tackle human cognition and consciousness and the rational faculties, metacognition, which we have and the animals do not possess, especially metacognition, It's because why do we know these things? Why? What's the point if life is fundamentally nihilistic? What's the point of being aimed to seek truth? Okay, and that's what we want. We want truth. We want meaning. The Homo sapien, the thinking man. We want meaning. And if we're going to make up our own meaning, then that's misosophy, not philosophy. We need to seek truth. And I would say Islam provides a very coherent worldview, the divine covenant. Check out my video on it. It will provide you a lot of coherence. Life is not imposed on you. Okay? You chose free will, and you're now experiencing free will and this worldly life, and it is nothing but a test indeed. Okay, so know the difference between methodological naturalism and philosophical. Do not say I don't adhere to philosophical, I adhere to methodological. That doesn't make sense, because or else it's as if saying I'm a scientismist. I adhere to scientism, or else you'll be saying that. And there is no point of really, if you're a scientismist, there is no point of conducting with the monotheists, because you came in with science. And if you understood the philosophy of science, it has philosophical underpinnings, and it has no foot in the door to discuss things on a metaphysical scale, like if God exists. You'll have no choice but to become a philosophical naturalist or a panpsychist, or maybe some other worldview that is in line with atheism, okay? Or else become a postmodernist. Do not adhere to any ideology. Don't even take science as an ideology, because Friedrich Nietzsche would tell you that if you delve into science deeply, okay, like in the mechanics, it's fundamentally nihilistic. Science cannot tell you what music feels like. Because music is a spiritual state when you listen to it. And that's why I say we're spiritual beings. So science is fundamentally nihilistic, as Nietzsche said in the gay sciences. And that's all I wanted to say. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.